You're listening to the Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast. Today's episode is about loving your toxic in-laws without living peaceably. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast is your sanctuary for navigating these sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws, while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered nearly 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Welcome to today's episode. I am Miriam Susan, your host, and today we're going to be talking about kind of a weird topic, weird title for this podcast, isn't it? About loving your toxic in-laws without living peaceably. Many of us have been accused of not trying to be at peace with our in-laws, and we're going to look at what the scripture says about this topic. So our reference for today from the scriptures is from the book of Romans, and it is from chapter 12, verse 18, and it is from the New Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition. St. Paul says, "If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all." So we are called to love our in-laws. And maybe you do love your in-laws, but you don't like being around them. So does that make you a bad person? Does that make you an evil, bitter, hateful daughter-in-law? I would say no, it does not. Yes, the scriptures say that we are told to love everyone, but what happens when love doesn't feel warm and fuzzy? What happens when love doesn't feel like wanting to spend time with your in-laws? So let's look at the definition of love. Love does not mean liking your toxic, demanding, controlling, manipulative in-laws' behavior. You can care about the well-being of your in-laws while still recognizing that their actions hurt you. Because love is not a feeling. It is a choice to seek the good of someone, even if they don't seek yours. That is the definition of true love, of true unconditional love. If there are conditions on the love, then that is not love. If we believe this lie that if we truly loved them, we'd want to spend every holiday together. We'd want to spend every birthday together. We'd want to have dinner with them every Sunday and not feel frustrated. That is extremely confusing because those two, loving our in-laws and not wanting to spend time with them and not wanting to be around them, those can exist at the same time. Loving someone doesn't have to mean that we enjoy spending time with them, that we enjoy their company. So we might be confusing love with tolerance of harmful behavior. We have to remember that we can love somebody and it's not that we are putting conditions on this love. That's very different. That's saying if you have conditional love, it's saying, I will only love you if. But we can love somebody and still not want to spend time with them and still not like how they treat us and still not want to talk to them. We have to unravel this idea that loving someone has to equal all of these things. Unloving actions don't cancel our call to love. And that's a really hard thing to think about when you think about some of the really toxic, some of the really damaging and manipulative behaviors that you may be seeing from your in-laws. They might manipulate you every chance they get. They might stomp on every single boundary you put down. They might undermine you in front of your husband, in front of your children, in front of all the extended family. But we are still called to love. So before I go any further, I do want to clarify this definition of love that we are to have for our in-laws. Again, this doesn't have to be the warm, fuzzy, want to give them a hug every time you see them, want to spend, all this time with them. That is not the only definition of love. Love has many different layers. And Father Mike Schmitz from Ascension Presents, has a really great video on YouTube about love. And he talks about there's 3 different kinds of love. The first kind of love is the love that is owed to every single human being because they are created in God's image. It is a command. We are to love people in that way. We love them because they are created in God's image. We love them because they are fellow human beings. There's another layer of love that people are owed, and that is a love or a respect for their role. So it can be a love that we have for the Pope. Whether we agree with them or not, we are to love our Pope because he is the authority over the Catholic Church. We are called to love our parents, love our grandparents because of the role that they have in our lives. We are called to love our law enforcement because of the role they have in protecting our cities and countries. That is a kind of love that is owed, and a respect that is owed. But then there is this third kind of love and respect that is earned. It is not owed, it is earned. And that is the kind of love that we don't have to show to our in-laws. Yes, I did just say you don't have to love your in-laws in this way. And that kind of love is the love that you hopefully have for your children and for your husband, that you have for your friends, because they show that they love you in the same way, that they seek out your well-being. They seek out what is best for you. And hopefully that is the love that you share with them as well. But that doesn't mean we have to share that kind of love with our in-laws. I think the problem that most of us who are English speakers face is that there really is just one word for the many different kinds of love. One of our pastors, a Protestant pastor that we had, gave a sermon one time about all the different kinds of love. There is a love that you have for your spouse. There's a love that you have for your children, and that is a different kind of love. But in English, we have only one word for all of these different kinds of love. So the English kind of does us a disservice because it's very hard to distinguish the word from the different meanings. So we can love our in-laws because they are fellow human beings. We can love our in-laws because they give life to our husbands. And that is the love that we are called to have. Yes, it feels unfair to have this kind of love for our in-laws because we have to step up and be the mature adult in the relationship when they are acting like children, throwing temper tantrums and demanding things be a certain way. But Paul says in Romans, in the verse that I shared at the beginning of this episode, if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, because there are limits. There are limits to live peaceably with other people. If you are trying to be at peace and your in-laws are not, then that, to me, says that it is an impossible situation. And if you have done everything that you can, as it says, so far as it depends on you, and they make it impossible, then you can't live peaceably with your in-laws. So you need to reframe how you see boundaries with your in-laws. I've talked about this on many, many episodes, that boundaries are an expression of love, not a lack of it. Because boundaries say, I'm putting this line in the sand for my well-being and for yours. Now, toxic people will never, ever see boundaries as for their benefit. They will see it as, this is you being bitter, this is you trying to punish me, when really, if you have a boundary saying no FaceTime calls after 8 p.m. with the grandchildren, that is not because you hate your in-laws. It's probably because, 8 o'clock is kind of a crazy time in a household with young children, and trying to get them on a video call when they're trying to make faces into the camera and getting them all riled up when they're tired. It's the end of the day and it's really time for them to go to bed. That not only causes chaos in your home and for your kids, but it also doesn't give your in-laws a really good opportunity to talk to the kids because they're wired and they're crazy and they're super tired and they just need to go to bed. Now, that is a boundary that your in-laws probably would not like, but it's really for their best. If they really want to have a good call with the children, they should want to do it at a time when the children are at their peak. They are not hungry, they're not grumpy, they're not tired. That is the best time to do a video call. So that boundary your in-laws might take as being hateful or mean, or you trying to limit time with the grandchildren, when really it's for both of your benefits. We also have to think about when we love, are we trying to control and manipulate how it is received by our in-laws instead of just offering it? Because a lot of times when we do things, we can have an expectation of what the response will be. And we have to be willing to let go of however our in-laws receive our acts of love. If they truly are acts of love, we have to give it freely. We cannot include any conditions, any strings attached when we offer it. Because if we do have conditions, if we do have strings attached, then that's not love. Then that's trying to manipulate and control. We're not just offering it freely, we have strings attached, and we cannot do that and call that love. So love also has limits. We can love someone and still protect our families from their dysfunction. You can love that uncle that you have that has struggled with substance abuse for most of his life and still protect your family from him when he is going through one of his episodes. That is loving. Sometimes the most loving thing to do is to not enable someone's harmful patterns. At some point, we have to stand up and say, this pattern that exists in this family, that exists in this culture, will not continue for the next generation. It's on us as wives, as mothers, as parents, to step in and say, this is unhealthy. I don't want this continuing for my children to have to figure out and clean up the mess later. We need to know that there is freedom in releasing ourselves from this impossible task of trying to have our in-laws love us back properly. We cannot control how other people act. We cannot control how they treat us, except by using boundaries and saying, if you cannot treat me and my family a certain way, then you will have no access. Opening those doors and keeping them open without any boundaries really enables their sins. It opens the door to a near occasion of sin. And I don't know about you, but I have enough things to go to confession over than to add in enabling somebody else's sin on top of all the ones that I commit myself. So we have to release ourselves from that task of thinking that our in-laws have to love us back in a certain way if that's not something they're even capable of. So loving our in-laws well needs to mean that we step out of this dance of dysfunction. We tap out. We sit this one out. The dysfunction can go on within their circles if their circles permit it, but we have to be the ones to stand up and say, no, it's not going to happen here. And we have to stop confusing loving with enabling, because that's what we do if we keep the door open to allowing dysfunctional, harmful, or abusive behavior within our immediate family. We have to step up. We have to take a stand and put a stop to this cycle. We can only control our part in living peaceably. St. Paul says, so far as it depends on you. If you have done everything you can, like my husband and I feel like we have done with my in-laws, we have tried every avenue to allow for a peaceful, harmonious relationship with his parents, but they don't accept it. They refuse. They ignore our boundaries. And so as much as we have tried, so far as it depends on us, it seems that it is impossible to live peaceably with my in-laws. And maybe that means that love looks a little different than you thought it did. Maybe you thought it did mean that you just need to become a doormat daughter-in-law, let them step all over you, but that's not really love. If somebody has to hurt you to show their love, that's not love. You are not responsible for making your in-laws loving people. The only thing you're responsible for is being a loving person yourself. I encourage you to reflect and to think about what love is actually requiring of you versus what shame and guilt are trying to tell you that it does. Because the enemy loves to use shame and guilt when you've done nothing wrong to get you to not be who God is calling you to be. This tension that exists between you and your in-laws on some level is normal. There is tension between what we want and what other people want all the time. I'm sure you've had it with your husband. You probably have seen it with your children. You probably have experienced it with your siblings and even with your friends. There is a certain level of tension that is normal. But what happens with toxic people is that tension escalates and you can't work it out because they don't accept your boundaries. They're not willing to try to live peaceably with you. You may be trying everything you can to live peaceably with them, but if they're not willing to work with you, that's when it becomes impossible. And that's what I love about this scripture is St. Paul gives us grace within this. It's not at all costs, live peaceably with all. No, he says, if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. It is not a demand. There's a lot of grace in that scripture. And it gives me great peace to know this scripture, to know that with everything that we have tried, and we feel like we have tried everything, that as far as it depends on us, we cannot live peaceably with my in-laws. I hope this is an encouragement to you. I know it is hard to live with constant tension with your in-laws and to try to do what's right, and they just don't accept it. So really, I really encourage you to lean on these words from St. Paul to know that if you've done your best, if you've done what is within your ability to do to live peaceably, and they do not, if your in-laws do not want to live peaceably with you, then know that there is grace, and to know that sometimes it's just not possible to live peaceably with everybody. God bless you. Go in peace. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. But before you go, I want you to know something. If you're feeling exhausted after every family visit, questioning whether you're overreacting, or if you're replaying conversations you had with your in-laws for days afterward, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. I've created a free guide called 5 Signs You're Not Too Sensitive, What Your Gut is Really Telling You, that will help you to understand why these interactions feel so hard and give you some gentle scripts to use in those moments when you're caught off guard by your in-laws. You can grab a copy at desiringpeace.com/signs. That's desiringpeace.com/SIGNS. You're not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with respect. I'll talk to you next week. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.